Welcome everyone to the FloTrack podcast. I'm Ashley Tishins here in studio in Austin, Texas. Today marks episode 693 of the podcast, talking about all things running in track and field. On today's episode, we're going to dive deep into everything that happened at the Chicago Marathon over the weekend. However, before we can go any further, I want to welcome in our new co-host calling in from New York City. He's our newest member of the FloTrack team, and that's Johnny Pace. Johnny, so excited to have you. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm coming off a great marathon weekend. Stoked to be with you today. We got so much to unpack, including my own race, which was a great way to experience the race on the ground. They said we wanted on the ground coverage, so figured we'd do it, all 26.2 miles of it. So great to be with you.
Yeah, that's right. Johnny ran the marathon. I definitely didn't run the marathon. I was just there watching and spectating as a media member. But yes, like you mentioned, I know we're going to dive, later on everything, getting your own recap from what you had running the marathon. But, before we even get into that, I think we have to talk about just everything that happened in Chicago with the elite side, because it was just wild. If we're looking at exactly what we're talking about today, we have a world record to talk about. We have some other fast performances to talk about. We have some top U.S. finishes to mention and break down too as well. So let's get to it. I think we have to begin here with our Chicago Marathon recap with the biggest storyline that came out of this. Ruth Chepngetich destroying the women's marathon world record in Chicago, 2:09:56 on the clock. I mean, my goodness, she lowered the previous world record of 2:11:53 by nearly 2 full minutes. And goodness, I know for me, myself in the media room, I was just completely shocked. And everyone in there was like, is she actually going to break this record and go under 2:10? Johnny, I want to get your thoughts first. What's your reaction to this? I know you were running and you probably didn't hear about it until after you were done, but 2:09, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still processing that. I think we've seen something that is unprecedented, just absolutely incredible run. I think really going into this weekend, the question on my mind was, where can we go from last year's incredible marathon weekend where we saw the men's world record get shattered by Kelvin Kiptum, and I think we'd be remiss to not, mention his race last year and his passing. And I think this weekend clearly delivered and stunned a lot of folks, including myself. And just by the pure statistics of it, this performance may be even more impressive than last year's world record. And so, Ruth, kudos to Ruth for an incredible run and just leaving us with so much to talk about. Absolutely mind-blowing performance down there in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned Kelvin Kiptum's world record last year, because I was there covering that. And at the time, I was like, I may never see anything as great as that, 2 minutes, 35 seconds, under 2:01. No one's ever gone under 2:01 like that before on the men's side. I think you're right. I think this has to top it. I mean, we've never seen a woman go under 2:10 before. If you're looking at this in a way to compare to other performances on the track, right? If you're looking at IAAF scoring tables, this is a performance that would give you the same amount of points as a female if you went under 4 minutes in the mile. So if you're if you're comparing the two, I mean, I think that's a good way to show just how crazy this is. And the thing is too, I mean, she went out hot from the get-go. I think right from the beginning, we realized, okay, she's either doing something, going at a crazy pace right now, or she's going after an incredible mark. She went out in 15 flat for the first 5K, which, I mean, at that point, she was running with CJ Albertson, Zach Panning, some of the top elite men, which is pretty shocking to think about too. And then she split 1:04:16 through the first half. That's the fastest half marathon for women ever recorded on U.S. soil. I mean, again, you go down through the splits and it just gets even crazier as you break them down. And then again, 2:09:56, first woman to ever go under 2:10. The previous world record was 2:11:53 from Tigisa Sefa, which was set in 2023 at the Berlin Marathon. I mean, Johnny, looking at those splits there, put it into perspective maybe a little bit of what this means and just how dominant of a performance this was.
Yeah, absolutely. She definitely went for it. She took a big chance and I think historically we've seen she's employed similar strategies of going out extremely hard and then fading a little bit in the second half. And clearly this weekend it paid off and she ran out of her mind. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like I was going to say, going into the weekend again, knowing that the world record had gone down, this was a course uh, where something like this could happen, and it did happen. The course itself, amazing setup for world record running. Pretty much running, anybody who was in that race course for a good day. It's pancake flat. To put it in perspective, having run New York and Boston in the past year as well, those courses can kind of throw you off, in the start and leave you in a weird place because New York, a bit of an uphill, Boston, straight downhill, and your paces can be all over the place. But somewhere like Chicago, you get out fast, but you are flat, and so it is really conducive for an even splitted sort of race. Not to mention that you're running and weaving through the streets of Chicago in those first few miles. The crowd's energy is incredible. So really, you are off to a electric start versus somewhere like New York, where you're pretty much by yourself and the other runners. So it makes a lot of sense that she had such a strong first half. I'm sure some of the elite men were surprised to see her contending, coming up on them. I think she would have placed in the top 10 with that performance. And yeah, just that speed that she held and then maintained is just absolutely incredible. And, very happy that it paid off for her.
A couple other things I want to note too about Ruth Chepngetich. She's won Chicago before. This is her third title here in Chicago. She won back in 2021 and 2022. In 2022, she ran 2:14.18, which at the time was only 14 seconds away from the current world record of 2:14.04. So I know afterwards she told the media, she was like, hey, like after her race, she was like, I still had 2022 on my mind when I came so close to breaking the world record. And so not only does she now come here in 2024 and just break it, but she completely destroys it, which I think, she's seen how close she's been to a record before, but this time she gets it done. And then I think also too, I mean, she's self-coached. She's a mom, I believe. She's self-coached, and she's one that she's dictating her training. She knows what it takes to get it done on the day. And so I think that makes the story almost even more unique in this way. And at the same time, though, it's also an indicator that I think while the time itself is so shocking in a way, in another way, too, it's like, well, we've seen her do some crazy things, too, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long time coming with her. And, we got to remember she was a 2019 world champion in the marathon as well. I mean, a long storied history of continually improving. And clearly she came back with a vengeance, not only dipping under the world record that she has been close to in the past, but absolutely blowing it out of the water. I think I'm not going to say that it's going to stand for a long time because, as we know, the prior record has only stood for, I think, about a year. So who knows? Who knows where we go from here? But certainly an impressive mark, and just really speaks to kind of the golden age of running that we are currently in. It seems that with the latest developments in training technology, that just records are going to continue to fall, and it's really such an exciting time to be a fan of the sport, just because it feels like athletes have just reached into a new stratosphere.
Agreed. Yeah, I think now the question for me is like, all right, when would we ever see this record get touched? Because I like you said, like I think when I watched Berlin in the 2:11, like to myself, I was like, gosh, this isn't getting touched anytime soon. And then here we are, like you said, a year later, and not only was it touched, but it was just destroyed. And I think you're probably right. It does speak to, I mean, at this point, every major brand has their carbon plated shoes and their racing shoes, the new shoe technology for these elite runners. I mean, we've seen developments in training and adaptations in that over time, and new technology. So I think that's obviously, worth mentioning here as well. But I know for me, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this goes, where we can go from here.
Yeah, 100%. And, just kind of touching on the shoe technology in this new age, I find it really neat that, with Eliud Kipchoge back in 2017, ushering in kind of this new era, we've seen kind of this rising tide that has lifted a lot of ships. And I thought it was pretty cool to see that, it's not exclusive to the Nike camp, that we're seeing performances across all sorts of brands. I mean, shout out to Brooks, which we'll get into later, having the top American runners. And, clearly Adidas as well. In other races, we see just a really amazing new era. And I think athletes knowing what is possible and redefining what's possible is really exciting. And I'll speak also, as a more casual runner, that these shoes also enable you to train and recover at a much better rate. It's not limited just to race day. In fact, I think you see a lot of the benefits of this new era coming in during the training. For example, every long run that I did, which historically would have left me, hobbling along, you bounce back so much quicker and you can run at a faster speed, come back quicker. And I think that's not to be understated. I think that is having a big impact on the level at which our elite athletes are able to train. Also the new innovations, even in gels, like Morton kind of coming on the scene in the last several years, at least from a personal perspective and experience, these things like really make a big impact as far as energy levels throughout the race. And it's just cool. I think I love to see innovation. I love seeing, continued refinement that allows these athletes to continue to push that boundary.
Definitely think that we're, just from looking at pure innovations and results alone, that we're definitely in a special era for distance running. Now, I know we just talked a lot about the world record there, but it wasn't the women's race that was exciting. The men's race was also pretty exciting. We saw John Career win the men's title here in 2:02:44, and it was the second fastest ever for Chicago on that course. Only Kelvin Kiptum in his world record last year is the fastest time ever from Chicago. Johnny, what do you think about this too? The men's race was a lot different than the women's, right? The men went out pretty conservative. They were sticking in the 1440s or so for many of those first 5Ks, but then it was John Career that I think around 30K was like, all right, see ya, and he just took off.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely dropped the hammer on that field. It was really impressive to see. I think we saw a few 420 miles there at that move, and just very quickly John asserted himself and held on. I got to give props to him, because at that point in the race, it's a little more quiet. It's like pretty far out from most of the crowds, and so to make such a decisive move at that point just really impressed me a whole lot. And yeah, he had a very high bar. I mean, the world record being the fastest time, I mean, that's a pretty high bar to set, but you got to give props for an incredible run by John. And, the rest of the field as well, like they kind of became a battle for second, but, the performance by John, I think, is not to be understated, despite Ruth's incredible run.
Yeah, if you're looking at how the race played out, there was, on the men's side, there was a huge group of about 10 men for most of the time. Then it slowly dwindled down to about 7 guys. And then once the pacers dropped, it was really Career that said, all right, let's really put down the hammer. And it went for a while, for most of that entire race, they were running around 2:04 mid-pace the entire way. And then all of a sudden you inject some pace there with Career, and he created a 90-second gap between him and the rest of the field, like it was night and day. Like it just happened right there. And then, like you mentioned, I mean, he dropped some 420s miles in there, which at the end of, the latter half of a marathon is pretty impressive. If you're looking too, I think this is an interesting note. If you look at what he split from 30 to 35K, that 5K was 14:01. That's huge difference in what they had been running early on. I know afterwards at the press conference, someone asked him actually about that split. He said, that 14:01 split, that's almost like that's a Kelvin Kiptum split, right? Like that's something that we saw just last year in that crazy run. And I think Career, he reflected on that, and he was like, during that race, I thought a lot about Kelvin Kiptum, and just it kept me really motivated to continue on and really push for that title, which I thought was just kind of a nice note too, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of on my mind as well, as I was speaking with the athletes ahead of the race, that just like knowing what had gone down last year, if not Chicago, then where? So I think that's cool. I mean, if John drew some inspiration from Kelvin, just knowing that this is a course to run fast and it's a course to take chances, that good things can happen. And um, yeah, it was cool to see him after the race surrounded by what seemed to be friends and family. They were fired up. They were singing and dancing, and um, you know, nothing but kudos to him for making that move and giving us a amazing race.
It was a PR too for him, I believe, by nearly 3 minutes. I believe his previous PR was 2:05:01. If you're looking at what he did, he ran Chicago last year and he did it the year prior too, so he knew this course. And that was another thing too he talked about when he decided to really, go for it there in the final kilometers. He knew he could break 2:03 and go after that 2:02. That's something he and his coach had talked about, and so I think that's interesting to worth noting as well. And if you're looking at his career too, he started off, I believe, at like a 2:09 marathon. So to see that progression from 2:09 all the way to 2:02, I mean, that's called training right there and developing over time as an
Yeah.
athlete.
Yeah, and I'd also want to kind of shout out the second place and rest of the podium. We had Muhammad Asa with a second place finish. I think this was probably one of his best performances. A bit of a shakeup because he's part of NN running team, and I was with them in the days leading up, kind of shooting as they were preparing. And Baranu Legesse was the reigning. He has won Tokyo in the past, and I think was probably contending to win this race, and unfortunately dropped out. So that was a bit of a surprise there. Hopefully he's doing all right. But yeah, his teammate Muhammad Asa put on an amazing show and came in second. Um, and so got to give props to him. I think this was a big breakthrough race for him.
All good things there on the men's side on, looking at the top results. But I think before, we just broke down the women's and the men's winners, but before, I think we have to talk about the U.S. contingents, right? Like the top Americans. I think while I think there were a lot of high hopes going in to the weekend and to Sunday for the Americans, maybe not all of them were met, but at the same time, I think we still saw some pretty impressive things. CJ Albertson was the top male for the U.S., finishing in seventh, and then Susanna Sullivan, excuse me, she was the top American there on the women's side, also finishing seventh overall. I mean, what do you have to take away, Johnny, from this, this performance here from the Americans?
Yeah, there's a lot to love about this story for both of them, and it's been quite a year for the Brooks Marathon contingency. I think we saw some really bold performances at the Olympic trials. We saw CJ being the top American in Boston a few months ago. These guys are on fire, and kind of their backstory too is really inspiring as well. And yeah, they really dropped the hammer, and really excited for both of them. Yeah, both of them are also full-time teachers. I think that's a really cool aspect of their backstory, and just to see them come out and put on a performance like this, extremely impressive.
Agreed, totally. CJ Albertson, 2:08:17. I believe that's a PR for him. Susanna Sullivan, 2:21:56. Also a PR for her. I know her goal was trying to aim for that 2:20 to 2:22 range, and she got under 2:22, so that was great for her. And I love too that you mentioned, like, they are both teachers. CJ Albertson is a teacher and a coach at Clovis Community College out in California. And then I know Susanna Sullivan, I believe she's a math teacher, a sixth grade math teacher full time. So, I mean, they're juggling plenty of other duties. And I know CJ afterwards in the press conference was telling the media, he was like, some days you're just running around, because he's also a dad and a husband, along with being a coach and a teacher. And he's like, goodness, some days you just have to act like a functional zombie, which I thought that was a funny note. He's like, sometimes you're just trying to get through to the better days and just, fulfill your responsibilities. But I think that says something about the determination for a lot of these athletes, and, especially these runners that are pursuing their careers in running as well as other careers as well. And I think that's kind of a cool note.
Absolutely. And you assume sometimes that the most elite athletes kind of have it all, like they're very comfortable, fully supported training environments. But I think it speaks to the majority of marathon runners out there that even the very best are having to juggle a lot of responsibilities and demands. And hopefully, I know for me, certainly it gives me some inspiration that like, uh, even if conditions aren't perfect, that you can still put on great performances. So I love to see that. I think the other cool call out was with Susanna, who I was talking with at the press conference. She ran the marathon in Budapest back in 2023 and pulled out with a pretty debilitating injury. I believe it's a stress fracture that left her pretty much unable to walk until May, when she said she really resumed training. So that is really incredible that, her build starting in May led her to this race. I feel like hopefully this is only the start for her, and really happy that she was able to, come back from that injury that, be very difficult to gain your momentum back. So,
Yeah, she talked to the press afterwards that I believe she broke her kneecap. I believe she had fractured her
yeah,
kneecap, which, I mean, that's definitely a long journey to recovery. And she said, there were a
yeah,
lot of long days in the pool, just trying to get back to a point where then she could resume running. And she described this whole training block leading into Chicago as a dream training block, and I think we saw that in the results, running 2:21:56 a PR, after having such a debilitating injury. So I think that's definitely worth the call out.
yeah. Yeah, props to them. I would also say I left a little bit disappointed we didn't get to see Kiera D'Amato, you know, finish out the race. I was certainly very interested to see, how she came back. She's had a pretty amazing year transitioning to the track to at the Olympic trials, running the 10K to try to nab a spot on the Olympic team there, and then moving out to Utah in the last couple months to train with a group. I thought it was really interesting. This was the first time she has trained with a group since college, so uh, there seems to be a lot of excitement about that. But yeah, unfortunately, she pulled out on account of an injury, and so we're wishing her the best. She was texting me yesterday, and she said that she will be back as soon as possible. So hopefully, we won't have to wait too long till we see her lining up. But also got to give a shout out to her husband, Tony Slugs, Anthony D'Amato. They had a little challenge going to see if he could be within 40 minutes of Kiera. And he ended up running a pretty impressive 3:04, which is a 6:56 average. And so
That's
got
solid.
to give a yep, got to shout out to him for a great marathon.
But I agree. Yeah, I think personally, I was really looking forward to seeing Kiera D'Amato run and see what she could do. I know it was revealed on the NBC broadcast during the race there in Chicago that she had been dealing with some plantar issues. Ed Eyestone, her new coach there out in Utah, was on the broadcast and kind of talked a little bit about how some of those issues developed leaning into her her taper for Chicago, and they were hoping that maybe it would just be a little thing that she could just, on race day, just completely forget about and it'd be fine. But unfortunately, it looks like they, caused some issues for her. I don't think she made it to 15K, but looking forward to hopefully seeing her back at it soon. I want to go through too the rest of some of these other big results here from the U.S. In Chicago over the weekend. I think obviously, as we mentioned, Albertson was the top male for the U.S., finishing 7th overall. But we also have Zach Panning, who we all know. I think we all remember him from him leading the U.S. Olympic marathon trials earlier this year. He finished 10th overall. You also can look at someone like Reed Fisher, part of Tin Man Elites. He ran a PR of 10:14, I believe, and finished 14th overall. And so, I think if you're looking just as a whole, there across the board, there were some good performances on the men's side.
Yeah, absolutely. American marathon running is alive and well. We love to see these guys having great races and continue rolling. I do. I think we forgot to mention CJ's planning to come back and run New York in 2.5 short weeks.
Yep,
So
yep, that's
very impressive
crazy.
double from him. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know. It was funny. And then too, afterwards, the media was chatting with him, and someone asked like, "Okay, you're gonna run New York. Is that your last marathon of the year?" And he was like, I don't know." So he still may run again. Who knows?
Wild man, but yeah, gotta respect it. Not afraid to toe the line. CJ himself said he loves racing, so it's the best thing to do if you love racing, I guess, is to race. And yeah, of course, Panning, he's definitely he's become a favorite of mine just after that very bold run in Orlando, where yeah, he was leading a lot of the way. again, another member of the Brooks Marathon cohort, which seems to be on a roll right now. Um, so yeah, great performances from the men.
And then
How about on the
last,
women?
I was gonna say, yeah. Before we move on, we gotta mention the women too. Susanna Sullivan again, 7th overall. Lindsay Flanagan was 9th overall. Emma Bates was 11th. Annie Frisbee was 14th. So as you just go down the list, there's still good performances. Do I think that necessarily it was the times that everyone was hoping for based on what they were, some of the ambitions a lot of these women talked about, leading into the marathon? Probably not, but I think still overall a lot of, if you look at how the U.S. contingent ran on the women's side, especially, a lot of them grouped up into little packs almost, right? Like they were all kind of working together at points, it seemed like. And so I think that had to play a factor. And I think, reading some of the recaps from Chicago, a lot of the women said, we did try to pack up a little bit, but, maybe we kind of decided to be less aggressive at the beginning, just, feeling out how the conditions were. And so that, that's what the results came in for there.
Yeah, and speaking of the women, I'm curious. I remember Emily Sisson obviously took the top American last year, and I know she was in Chicago but didn't race. Did you hear why that was? Is she planning to race at a later point?
I'm actually not 100% sure. That's funny that you mentioned that, though, because I did see her out running one of the mornings when I was running on the lakefront path. So she was definitely there. But yeah, I know she's certainly had the success in Chicago in the past. Hopefully, we'll be able to see her, soon.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I mean, hopefully there's going to be some more, competitive matchups on both the men's and women's sides. But I don't think this will be the last time that we have an exciting, marathon showdown.
That's for sure. And now I think to properly, sum up and close out our marathon recap, we have to talk with you, Johnny, about your own Chicago Marathon recap. As we mentioned earlier, you ran the marathon this weekend. You PR'd 2:37. For someone that hasn't ran a marathon or wants to know what Chicago's like, I think we would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, when I was interviewing with FloTrack, they did say they wanted that on the ground coverage, and so had Fifth Ave mile, had to represent. I think that was first week on the job, and then following it up with Chicago. The hardware's here with me.
Nice,
Beautiful
love it.
medal. Had a lot of fun. Shout out to Nike for having me out. They definitely gave me a great treatment and made me feel really loved out there. Again, after seeing Kelvin break that world record last year, I was shooting in there on the finish line, and I just thought I was very moved by that and hoped that someday I'd get that opportunity to line up. Very grateful to have been able to do that this year. I will say, just I'm still riding high. I think in our sport, a lot of times we're covering it. It's mainly about the elites. It's about the professionals. I think the marathon is such a perfect weekend because it captures all aspects of our sport, from the elites to the everyday runner, and we're all sharing that start line and sharing that race course. And to me, it's just such a beautiful celebration of a community coming together, and you really can't find that anywhere else except the marathon majors. The energy out there was palpable. It was an incredibly fun course to run, from the gun, like I said, where you're running through the streets of Chicago, um, going up through Lincoln Park. I mean, cheer zones spread out pretty much every mile, sharing the love, keeping you going. I found personally that was a huge motivator, as many know, like having people out there supporting you and sending you good vibes. Um, for me, yeah, I wanted to hit a bit of a PR. I think I was a bit ambitious. I only had about a 6 week dedicated build, where I was doing workouts. So probably a bit ambitious to aim for an 11-minute PR. So, but that's what I attempted. So part of that, like I said earlier, that flat course facilitating a pretty quick start. I went through halfway about 2:30 pace, and unfortunately, second half had to hold on a bit for dear life to finish. But very happy with a 4-minute PR. Hopefully, this is just the start. I mean, I feel like, as many know, once you start doing marathons, you catch that bug, and you're always thinking about the next one. So, surely this will not be the last one.
You're not wrong about the bug. I've ran 2 marathons now, and I'm already like, all right, time for the next one. But I agree. Yeah, like there is something like I know I've covered Chicago twice now, and there is something different about the energy there that I really like. Hopefully, I can run it next year. Maybe I'll add that to the racing calendar for next year. But just in comparison to something like Boston, which I've ran, it's very, it's a like you said, the marathon in a way, it's almost like this the whole time you're running at some of these majors, it's like this huge bonding experience with everyone else around you, and then the crowd too. So yeah, I'm really really excited that you got to have such a good time.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to cheer for you at whatever your next race is. FloTrack's got to represent out on the circuit, so
Oh man, yeah. At this point, I feel like I'm just the casual hobby jogger out there, but you know what? We'll keep going. So, well, what better way to end our Chicago Marathon recap with our own Johnny Pace's recap of the race? So super excited to have that there. But don't go too far. Before you go, we have to end our show with a great exclusive interview that we have with CJ Albertson himself. He was the top American, seventh overall to 2:08:17 in Chicago. Take a listen, you guys. It's a great interview.
I'm here joined by CJ Albertson, top American finisher this weekend at the Chicago Marathon with a time of 2:08:17. CJ, congratulations on a fantastic race. How are you feeling today? We're 3 days out from the race.
Thanks. I feel good. Just kind of settling back into the routine of life. So just getting back to work, and then yeah, I had done some easy runs, and then got back to a workout today. So did like 14 by 1K, and the legs, they don't feel incredibly snappy, but they felt pretty much back to normal. So yeah, pretty good. Just I know like my body's probably still a little tired, so trying to intentionally rest a little bit more. But yeah, overall I feel good and just kind of back in the normal swing of things.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I feel like most folks when they finish the marathon aren't going to be running for a few days, but it sounds like you were right back to it. Were you running the next day after?
Yeah, I actually doubled the day of the marathon because I'm running New York, so I wanted to do all of the routines and recovery that I normally do after my long runs. And so I tried to rest as much as I could after the race on Sunday, and then Sunday evening I went out for like a short, just like, I don't know, 4.5 mile shakeout, and then followed by like the sauna and the hotel, and that kind of like just gets everything kind of flushed out, and then ran just kind of easy Monday morning, flew back home, and then Tuesday, got back to like doubling and just normal things. But yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good. I think it's more of like a mental thing. Most people are like, oh, I ran my marathon, I'm mentally, I'm done. But since I have another race, coming up, I just wanted to do what I always do. I typically run pretty hard and long on Sundays, and um, and you can be okay as long as you just kind of stick to some recovery stuff. So yeah, I just kind of kept the routine pretty
Yeah.
much exactly the same, and I feel pretty much exactly the same as I normally do. So um, yeah.
Well, glad to hear that. Yeah, so you're not done yet. You still got some races coming up very very shortly. So it's New York coming up next for you, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm excited for that one. It'll be my first time in New York, and it was my first time in Chicago too. So I figured I'd just get to get to see both of them at once. And Chicago was pretty awesome, and so hopefully New York will be as well.
Yeah, well, that's where I'm calling you from. New York is ready to welcome you. I think you'll like it. Everybody says New York City Marathon weekend is the best weekend in New York City, so I think you're going to be in for a treat. But yeah, I'm with you on Chicago. This was my second time. I shot it last year and then ran it this year. And Chicago is kind of underrated. It's a beautiful city. I don't know about you, but I'm really impressed, and I thought just a really fun place to visit too.
Yeah, I went for the first time in June, and I mean the weather was beautiful in June. I mean it was really nice this weekend too. But yeah, when I had never been to Chicago, honestly, really knew nothing about it. And then I was only here. I was only there for like a day and a half, but I was like, wow, this is like really nice. And like I had gone alone, but I like talked to my wife after. I'm like, yeah, it was like super nice. Like the whole city was just like, I don't know, like you have like the beach right there. I mean, it's a lake, but looks like a beach, and I mean, just so much to do, like all this stuff in the city. I went to like the museum and the aquarium, observatory, um, some other museums. Like there's just like so much, and it was all just like, I don't know, just it's super nice, and just like parks everywhere, greenery everywhere. So I was like, this is like super nice. Like this is like such a nice place. And so I was excited to like go back for the marathon.
Right.
And we had pretty good weather, so it was just like the whole weekend was just, just really nice.
Yeah, and we both have that track and field background, but usually more closed events is like your teammates and maybe a few spectators. But for both of us having kind of gotten into marathons in the last few years, like I feel like a marathon weekend is pretty unbeatable as far as just energy, and it's like such a community thing. Like you get people of all levels. Like it's always a blast. I don't know about you. Would you say the same as far as the energy of like a marathon weekend?
Definitely. I mean, the energy from when you first get there, it's like there's just so many people out on the roads around. I mean, trying to go out for a run, the Friday and Saturday before before the race is just like there's people everywhere. Just running all these shakeout groups. I mean, just so much going on, but bunch of brands everywhere. I mean, it's just there's just so many people in kind of like a condensed area, all kind of centered around like running and particularly marathon running. So yeah, it's really cool. And I feel like, yeah, marathons are just, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've never been to like another like big time thing, but I'm thinking like even the World Series, is it like is just massive crowds everywhere like the entire weekend, or is like they kind of just show up for the game? It's like I'm sure Super Bowl weekend is maybe more like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just pretty incredible, and it definitely makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, 100%. Um, well, so yeah, let's talk about this race. I mean, I guess I'd be curious, how are you feeling overall about how it went?
It went well. I mean, I coming in, I thought I could probably run between 207 to 209. My PR was 209.53 coming in, and so I thought I could run under 209, but it's like I would still have to PR by a minute to do that. So I was like realistically, somewhere between 207 and 209, and so the we I knew there was going to be a pace group. Well, I didn't know until the day before the race, but we found out the day before the race it'd be a pace group around 63:30. And I knew I probably wasn't going to break 207 or run 207 flat, but I felt like I could go out at that pace and feel pretty comfortable and then have a very slight positive split. And I thought I could maybe go 63:30 and then try to be under 64:30 and run somewhere in the 207s. Um, and for the most part, I almost did that. We went 63:20, and then kind of held pretty much that pace, slowed down just slightly up until 30K. And then from 30K to 40K, I was a little slow, and dropped a little more time. I think I could have tightened that up and ran a little better there and been in the 207s. But at the end of the day, that time doesn't matter. It wouldn't have changed my placing. I still would have been seventh, and everything would have been the same. But yeah, for the most part, it played out kind of exactly how I thought that it could. I still, again, think I can be better from 30K to 40K, and because I finished decently well the last mile. But yeah, I mean, a minute and 36-second PR. So overall, I mean, it was a very solid day.
What do you think about the start? Like you've had a lot of times lining up in Boston, and Boston infamously gets you out really quick with those downhill, first few miles. Whereas in Chicago, it's pretty steady the whole time. Did that help as far as like pacing and energy management, just having that consistency?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you just get out, and again, we had a pacer, so I was kind of getting out, looking for the pacer, and kind of settling into my group. And so the first mile is always a little bit chaotic, and you're just trying to find your group, settle in, and then I'm not really overly concerned about the pace. Um, but again, having a pacer really helps because I don't have to think about it too much. And but yeah, I mean, yeah, the first mile was slightly chaotic, but then once we kind of got in the groove, got in our groups, it was just kind of just rolling at a pretty consistent pace. and going from there. And I think our pacer and our group just worked really well, and pretty much ran super consistent, like basically from the start.
Yeah. Um, the last you've been the last couple of races you've had Zach Panning with you, your teammate on Brooks. Do you guys work together? Does that help having somebody from Team Brooks there on the race with you?
I mean, we really only see each other on race day. He trains in Michigan for the most part. Sometimes they go other places, but yeah. So I only see him on race day. So it's not like we're training together and feeding off each other. But I mean, it is like nice to have like a familiar face, someone I've raced against, and been with at at some Brooks events and stuff. And we're kind of in a very similar spot in our careers in terms of like our times and our placements, and we're like right around each other, and now have accumulated some races together. And he's a guy that is getting better. I think has like potential to run a lot faster, and has kind of shown what he's capable of. So in my mind, I'm always trying to like you know make sure I can stay with him and be as good as him and be able to compete with him. So and he's kind of like a somewhat like of a standard, like as he gets faster and puts together these races, I'm sure he's gonna run real fast in his career. And it's like I don't want to get left behind, like I want to be there too, and like pushing him as well. So when we're racing, I feel like there's a somewhat of a sense of comfort, because like, okay, like I should be here, but also I know he's pretty good, so if I'm here, I'm doing well, but it's also where I should be. um and then late in the race, it's definitely like, I mean, I want to beat everybody, and I'm racing everybody, but since he's also like right there, it's another motivation to be like, all right, like I gotta stick with him, and if he does pull away from me, like find a way to chase him down.
This year, I feel like Brooks has been turning some heads on the marathon course. Susanna Sullivan on the women's side was the top American, and she's also a part of Brooks. What is that like? I mean, you feel like Brooks is making some waves in the marathon scene?
For sure, yeah, definitely had a ton of we've had a ton of success, and they've recently signed some people, and yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of the marathons, particularly like on the American side, like Brooks athletes are placing really high, and I think will continue to. Yeah, and for me, I mean, Brooks has just always been like a great company to run for and work with, and just like always at least in my experience, always just like a positive environment, positive people to work around, and they just kind of keep running, and even like the professional side of running, just like really fun, and just like it's kind of like laid back, like it's not too like, oh, like this is, I don't know. There's just like not that like serious. I mean, there's a focus, and like we're like intentional on trying to be as good as we can, but it's also not like this like forced pressure. It's just kind of like a very, I don't know, laid back sort of, but we're also going to be good type atmosphere. And every time I'm at an event, like at races or at any sort of Brooks gathering, it's just always like a good time, and just feels like these are like my type of people. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and definitely seen the success play out, and just putting a lot of work into shoe development, and the most recent shoes that we've been racing in, I feel like are, I think they're going to be coming out in February, but those will probably be the best shoes on the market, I think. So
Yeah.
uh, I would look for those when they come out. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know their official name when they start selling them, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, they feel great to run in, and so uh, I think in addition to the training and good environment, obviously having like probably like the best product also helps, and is a
Yeah.
little bit responsible. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I'd like to see us just continue to kind of like make our way up those ranks, and hopefully become a big factor, and even kind of hopefully dominate kind of the top part of the sport.
Yeah. That's interesting. And something I've really enjoyed seeing is like obviously in this new carbon plated era. I mean, in the last 7, 8 years, it's kind of been like a rising tide, and it's been cool to see in various races that it's not dominated by any one brand. That seems that the innovation is there, and like clearly Brooks has done some incredible developments that you guys are leading the American fields with those shoes. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. But so it's not the Hyperion Elite. It's a different.
It's very so the Hyperion Elite fours that are out now. It's going to be very similar to that, but they have a new outsole, a new foam, some little tweaks, I believe, to the upper. Um, it's good. Yeah,
What
it's
how involved are you kind of in those developments? Do they bring you in for feedback or testing of any sort?
Yeah, we pretty much test all the prototypes for the race shoes, and we'll do a couple rounds of testing and feedback. And I mean, since like 2020, kind of when I started with Brooks, we've just been going over different aspects of the shoes, and kind of in each new shoe development, just trying to tweak things. And like I'm not as involved in like the going out and finding materials and trying to source all those stuff, and that's not like I don't know every material in the world and all that stuff, but I know how things feel, and so it's communicating that, and then the fit of things, some of the like geometry of the things, and just like communicating like how it's feeling and what we want, and then they go out and find the materials and the designs that are going to fit that. So yeah, I mean, and I've kind of suggested certain things, or like you really feel like your feedback is taken, because even in some of the prototypes that probably won't come out, like I know they've kind of experimented with things that like I've kind of suggested, and so um, yeah, so it's like they do take the feedback from the athletes and then use obviously their expertise as like knowing all the materials and everything to put together the best shoe that we can.
Right. One other thing that I found kind of cool, and I can't remember who specifically, but I remember the Hanson's team in Orlando was up there giving a talk, and it was one of the more tenured athletes who's maybe been to 4 or 5 trials at this point. I think she's in her 40s at this point. Maybe Melissa Johnson White. But she was saying too that it's not only like race day, but like these shoes are also enabling you to like bounce back in training, train at a faster, speed at points, and then also recover faster. And I don't know about you, but like after the marathon this weekend, like after having raced in carbon shoes, the legs are a lot better than I would have expected. Do you feel like the benefits kind of extend there to like recovery and your training ability?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's probably not the carbon part of the shoes. It's most likely the foam,
Yeah.
the amount of foam, and then the type of material in the foam, so that that cushioning, reduced impact part. But yeah, I mean, I pretty much do all of my regular runs in the Hyperion Elite Four,
Yeah.
and then with our new shoes that we have, I use those for workouts and races. But primarily because the geometry is the same, and so I have. Uh, it just keeps like a very similar routine, whereas like sometimes you can, when you're switching shoes or using new shoes, it's like you run maybe slightly different and some little nicks and knacks come up. So I like to like keep everything kind of the same, so using the Hyperion Elite Force to train in it. But I also feel like, yeah, you can handle some more mileage, you can handle some higher intensity, because you're just not getting beat up as much. And so I can do some pretty intense stuff, and some pretty long workouts and long runs, and just not be like totally worn down from them.
Yeah, totally. Just to circle back real quick to the Chicago race, I thought it was clearly there was some world record performances being run. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the women's side with Ruth breaking that world record. I think you just barely were able to stay ahead, but I think she was in the top 10 if overall, and shattered that world record. What are your thoughts on that?
She ran amazing. Yeah, I mean, I was a little surprised, like to see her out that fast. I mean, she was like with us the first like 5K or 10K, and in my mind, like I thought they were gonna go out at like 65:30, so I was like, they're going out way too fast. because we were at 63:30 pace, and so like you guys are a little quick, but all right. But then obviously, she didn't necessarily keep exactly that pace, but I think her positive split progression was actually maybe close to ideal. Because a lot of people like look at it and it's like, oh, the first 5K she was at like 206:40 pace, like that's way too fast. But like it was just like 5K and it's really only like 4 or 5 seconds a mile fast. But then like she kind of gradually slowed down from there. But it was only like a few seconds a mile, like each 5K, and like you are wearing down as the marathon goes. So like her effort and output was probably close to the same throughout the whole race. It's just when your body's worn down, you become a little bit less efficient, and so I think the way that she positive split it, especially with pacers, like I mean, was actually probably maybe not like 100% ideal, but it's probably pretty close. I mean, maybe that first 5K could have been slightly slower, but I don't know, maybe not. I think people have it in their minds that you should negative split the marathon, but I don't think I don't that doesn't make sense to me physiologically because you're just there's no way you're going to be as fresh and as efficient the second half. So
Yeah.
if you're going to run an even output, you have to be faster the first half. So I think how she ran it was great. I mean, having pacers, she had at least two pacers for most of it, and then at least one pacer to finish with her. So, that's who knows exactly what that's worth, but with some of the testing they did for the breaking two, that could be 3 to 4 seconds a mile, um, maybe even more. So, I mean, it's like she ran really fast, but it also, I mean, given all the conditions, it's not. I mean, it's not like super crazy. And I also have the mindset that the marathon theoretically should be able to be ran very, very close to your threshold. Most people break down, but for a variety of reasons. But if you're not overheating, if you're great with your fueling and getting in as much carbs as you can, like you should be, you shouldn't have like the low glycogen effect. If you've trained enough so that your body doesn't break down as much, you should be able to hold an output pretty close to your threshold. Because like what else is responsible for fatigue? And like, to be honest, no one really knows the answer to that question. So I've always believed if you do the right training, you have the right fueling, you have the right pacing, you have the right conditions and aren't too hot, you should be able, you should be able to run theoretically just that threshold or right around it. And we see that in the half marathon. But really, what is the difference to the marathon other than just breaking down? But again, if you do the training and can not break down, it's like a car. A car doesn't break down.
Right.
It can just hold, 100 miles an hour for however long. So, I mean, eventually it'll break down. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's just like I think just people like historically, uh, we just haven't been that good at the marathon, because we like I mean, fueling wise, we've only efficiently fueled for the marathon in the past not that long. I mean, I don't think they had ample. I don't think they had good fueling strategies until maybe the last 10 to 15 years. Maybe there's a few people that would, but for the most part, it was maybe just luck if you fueled right, or maybe some people knew that they should, but it wasn't mainstream yet. We definitely didn't have the shoes, and so that's helping. Like people aren't breaking down as much, but they're also probably training. Not necessarily everyone's training more, but more people are able to train more without injuries, probably. And we should be better with understanding injuries, understanding how muscles work, and different just strength at different muscle lengths, and how to like effectively avoid injuries through strength training and through strength in rehab and being able to run even when we have little aches and pains. So yeah, I think just the marathon hasn't been super prepared for that well. And I think on the American side, like even for like American men, like I mean, by the time I'm done running, like whenever I retire, I don't know how long that will be playing, but like 205, 206 is going to be pretty like commonplace because it's not really that good. Um, but we just haven't really prepared like that well. And like I don't know if I'm necessarily like there's probably I mean, just people that naturally ran faster than I did in like 5K and 10K in college. I think a lot of those guys could run maybe faster. So like I don't think I represent like the epitome of American potential. Like even if I only run 207 in my career, it's like well I think a lot of guys can maybe are just inherently a little bit faster than me. So there's no reason why there's not going to be 10 to 20 guys that can run 205, 206 in the next 20 years or in the next 10 years I think. And then because other countries do that, and then eventually we can have those more 202s and whatever. But yeah, so I think long story short, it was an incredible performance. Um, but I think that it just more aligns with like my personal gut feelings about what the marathon is, how it can be run, or I guess what's theoretically possible of how it can be run.
Yeah.
And so for me, it makes sense, and I think more people will be able to do that and learn that like okay, the marathon isn't this incredible distance feat anymore. The marathon is essentially the 10K where we're just riding that line. We're just holding that uncomfortable effort, and it's a speed event. Like it's a
Yeah.
fast race. You got to be fast, and you just got to just ride it out like right at that line the whole time. And it's really not an endurance event like it, or it's not this crazy endurance event. It's a speed thing where so
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I know people have other thoughts on it, but that's where I'm coming
I
from.
mean, that's the best kind of holistic breakdown that I've seen so far. So thank you for sharing that. I think every point is a great point. It sounds like we're not done yet. That like it's only going to get faster and from here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna have a slew of women breaking 210 like anytime soon. I mean, I think that performance will be will be one of the top performances for a while. I mean, I'm sure that record will be obviously that record will be broken at some point. But I think like I don't necessarily think there's going to be like tons of women just breaking 210 now, or even under 212 or 213 now. Like that's still going to be like a really just incredible performance that isn't matched that often, at least in the anytime soon. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think just the idea of that is um, it will become a little bit more common, I guess.
Yeah. And how about on the men's side? Kelvin obviously gone too soon, but showing that a sub 2 hour on a certified course is within reach. Like, what do you predict with that and men's marathoning?
I mean, that was basically the same thing. I mean, when he was running that fast, I was like, this guy's basically just doing what I thought was possible for me in the marathon. And obviously, I'm not running sub 58 half marathons, so I'm not going to run a two flat marathon. But the slowdown between what I'm able to do in a half marathon to a marathon, and like the difference between my threshold pace and my marathon pace, I think is pretty tight. And I can't be the best in the world at running my marathon pace relative to my threshold pace. So like if I can do what I'm doing, then like some other guys maybe a little bit better. And if those guys that are a little bit better at that also can run sub 58 for the half marathon, well, of course a sub 2 hour is possible. So I think Kelvin, like, to me, just did what I've always since I started running marathons believed was possible, and I didn't really understand why it wasn't possible, and it just didn't make sense to me why more people weren't running fast, particularly in America. um because you have tons of athletes running 203, 204 that maybe they're not particularly fast in the half marathon, but yeah. So I mean, I think he for sure could have broken 2 hours. I mean, his huge negative split. It's like, I mean, if he ran a little bit more like Ruth did, he probably could have been low 159s, I think. But yeah, I mean, even John Career, I mean, he had a huge negative split. I mean, he there's likely a 201 guy with the right day and right pacing. So yeah, I think that's going to continue to get faster. I mean, I don't think breaking two is going to be commonplace anytime like anytime soon, but I think with what some of the athletes are running these half marathons in, and as more as just breaking 27 in the 10K just becomes, you're just another person, you're just another dude. It's like, then the marathon is going to be, it's going to get faster. And also that transition between the 10K to the marathon with the shoes, with the knowledge we have, and just nutrition, it's like the marathon's just not going to be scary for people. And you already have people like Hassan who are going back and forth from like, well, I mean, she does everything, but from
Yeah.
not just the 10K, but the 1500 to the marathon, but the 10K to the like, you can go kind of, some of these track athletes can go back and forth and be like, yeah, I mean, I do long runs. Like I can do a marathon, but still be good in the 10K. I mean, Galen Rupp won his medal in the Olympic marathon, what, like 6 days, or I don't know how many days, but in the same Olympics that he was, I think, fifth in the Olympic 10K. So, and that was, well, I guess they might have had prototype super shoes, but really it was before. I mean, so yeah, I think it's just going to continue to elevate, and people will be like, they'll have all these excuses for why it's faster, but it's going to get faster, and there's going to be just tons and tons of people running faster, just like in every distance event.
Yeah. You painted an exciting picture. Hopefully, it'll be fun for the fans to follow along over the next all the years to come. But thank you for breaking that down. I think again, you said it so well. Last question. I don't know. You said you haven't been to New York yet, but just to give you a heads up, the course profile is slightly different from Chicago. You see a lot of ups and downs, and not to mention it's in 2 weeks. So I'd love to hear where your head's at with it, how you're approaching it, what your goals are.
It's hard to know exactly. I mean, I've never ran the course before, so it's hard to have time goals, and the field is really deep, so it's hard to have even place goals. Like, obviously, I kind of a standard. I always want to be top 10 at a major. I'd like to be in contention for a top five, but at least where I'm at right now, top five typically is beyond my control. Kind of like at Chicago, it's like, I would have loved to be top five, but that was kind of outside my control. Like I probably wasn't gonna run 205 or two. I don't even know what fifth was. Probably 205 or 206 low, and it's like I was gonna run, what I thought 207 or 208, and so just other people had to have off days for me to get that top five. And New York is probably gonna be the same thing. I mean, realistically, I'm not one of the top five best, so I can run a fantastic race, and other people could struggle, and maybe I am like fifth or sixth or something, but I could also run a fantastic race and um, be ninth or 10th. Heck, I could even be 11th or 12th if just like everyone was on, but
Yeah.
so you kind of just have to run the best race that you can. And again, I don't know exactly how the paces play out and how I'll handle the course. For the most part, I think a lot of it is a lot of the hills come in the form of bridges, and those gradients aren't typically super high. I think they're more just kind of gradual, long, and maybe there's a few little kickers in there. But for the most part, I've been decent at low to moderate inclines. I haven't necessarily been great at like steep inclines, but I don't think there's as many steep inclines. I think it's more gradually up, gradually down. There's a lot of those, and it definitely makes the total elevation gain add up. And I think there's a couple little steep sections, but I'm hopeful that I can run it, pretty well, and just kind of lock into an effort and kind of grind that out, and hopefully stay pretty strong towards the end. And yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't really fully know what to expect, but I know it's going to be a stacked field. So I'm just going to try to race the best that I can, compete the best that I can, and try to run people down, because there'll probably be at least a couple people from the front back that maybe come back, especially on a tougher course. So yeah.
Well, very good, man. Well, best of luck to you, and thank you again for sitting down and recapping with us. And yeah, hope the next couple of weeks of final prep go well.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you.
What a great interview there with CJ Albertson to conclude our Chicago Marathon recap and conclude Johnny Pace's first ever episode here with us on the FloTrack podcast.
Yeah.
Love the confetti.
Huge day. Thank you for having me, Ashley. It was so fun chatting with you, and just kind of unpacking what an incredible weekend in Chicago. Ton of fun all around. And yeah, hopefully this won't be our last chat.
Hopefully not. I know I'm looking forward to future episodes with you. And then hopefully we can get you here in Austin soon too.
Yeehaw. Yeehaw. See you.
That's right. Well, guys, that concludes the FloTrack podcast for today. Thanks for listening in and take care.